The Subcommittee on Higher Education and Workforce Development will come to order. I note that the quorum is present. Without objections, the chair is recognized to call a recess at any time. Welcome to today's hearing on post-secondary innovation. And thank you to the witnesses for coming to testify on such an important topic. I think we all agree that America's colleges and universities play an integral role in shaping the direction of our country. They cultivate young minds as well as serve the pragmatic mission of preparing students for our nation's workforce. I also think we should all agree that this mission cannot be fully realized without colleges and universities graduating students at a consistent rate. This is the modern problem of the university system. 4 in 10 students do not complete their degree. Our current system is unaffordable, inflexible, and outdated. One major reason is the Higher Education Act, HEA, which provides legislative framework for post-secondary institutions, hasn't been fully updated since 2008. This traditional framework is at odds with the modern university experience and students. Over 30% of today's students are non-traditional, meaning they could be 25 years or older, part-time enrollees, full-time workers, or other unique situations. In order to promote access and completion for the modern student, the HEA needs to be revisited. Thankfully, universities are charting a path for Congress already. First, universities are distancing themselves from the conventional wisdom that measuring students' learning should be based on a set number of credit hours. Colleges are embracing competency-based education, CBE, to challenge the 4-year, 120 credit hour orthodoxy. CBE redefines education by the meaningful standards of skills masters versus the often arbitrary standard of credit hour completion. CBE is picking up steam on university campuses. Over 1,000 CBE programs are available at about 130 schools. Any reform to the HEA should recognize the alignment of the fundamental college mission with CBE and make it easier for these programs to exist. Some pilot universities are even reevaluating the notion that traditional undergraduate degrees should require 4 years of schooling. 3-year degree programs are underway at institutions around the country. By overhauling curriculum in a way that allows students to learn the skills and materials they truly need, these programs provide solutions to issues of student completion and debt. Of the innovative practices being discussed today, the rise on online education is perhaps the most obvious institutional shift since the last HEA reauthorization. The post-pandemic world has a very different relationship to the internet than existed in 2008. Not only is the internet a means of communication, but it also now serves as a mass forum for remote jobs and education. We must avoid calls to overregulate online programs that connect students to critical opportunities in post-secondary education. Lastly, universities are innovating through public-private partnerships. By engaging with private companies at every level of education, students gain irreplaceable hands-on career experience. In particular, HBCUs and MIS are doing a fantastic job of partnering with private companies to ensure that their students have in-demand skills for the modern workforce. In each of these areas, the institutional shifts have been slowed or constrained by the HEA. To the other side of the aisle, there's a wide bipartisan consensus that we need to give students more pathways from a successful education to a successful career. Let's start today. To the witnesses, we welcome your policy recommendations on how we can achieve these goals and strengthen American educational system to serve families, students, workers, and taxpayers better. I look forward to hearing from you and from my colleagues on this very, very important mission and issue. With that, I yield time to the ranking member for her opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Owens. Good morning. I want to express my gratitude to our witnesses for your testimony today. Welcome. Welcome to the Subcommittee on Higher Education and Workforce Development. The promise of higher education in America is that any student, no matter where they're from or the color of their skin, can access the benefits of a high-quality college degree. The evidence is clear that a college degree holds the key to the American dream. For instance, individuals with a bachelor's degree typically make about $1 million more than high school graduates over their lifetimes and experience higher employment levels. However, the declining value of the Pell Grant and state disinvestment in higher education has forced students and families to shoulder more of the cost of college. These rising costs particularly burdens Black college students. Over the last decade, we're seeing declines in Black student enrollment, and this is unacceptable. We as members of this subcommittee are responsible for guaranteeing that any student who wants to earn a college degree can do so. So, we must implement structural reforms that simultaneously tackle the challenge of making college more affordable and help the facilitation of recruiting a more diverse student body. Innovation can play a key role in making these reforms a reality. Improving wraparound student services, including career counseling, financial assistance, and employment support, can help students complete their degrees on time. We can facilitate clear pathways to college by offering students with flexible learning opportunities and ensuring institutions help students complete their education. But sacrificing equal access and opportunity for innovation is a disservice to students. Dual enrollment programs are a great example of the potential of innovative practices and strategies that will propel our quality of education. Dual enrollment helps high school students get ahead. They get a head start on college and can reduce the cost of getting a degree. Unfortunately, dual enrollment programs are far more accessible to a white, affluent student body as opposed to students of color. Proper investment in recruitment and retention of minority students could drastically improve dual enrollment student body diversity and ensure this innovation program reaches all students. It's clear that my Republican colleagues oppose Democratic efforts to hold institutions accountable for guaranteeing equal access to higher education opportunities. Our objective here is to ensure that institutions utilize evidence-based approaches to guarantee the success of these initiatives for everyone. Simply put, when we talk about innovation in higher education, we must remember that our responsibility is to expand, not limit, access to a high-quality degree. We must ensure access to high-quality degrees while innovating in higher education. So I look forward to hearing more about these successes and exploring innovative strategies to help students complete college and reach their full potential. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Pursuant to Committee Rule 8C, all members who wish to insert written statements into the record may do so by submitting them to the committee clerk electronically by Microsoft Word format by 5 p.m., 14 days after the date of this hearing, which is June 28, 2023. And without objections, the hearing record will remain open for 14 days to allow such statements and other extraneous material referenced during the hearing to be submitted for the official hearing record. I now turn to the introduction of our 4 distinguished guests and witnesses. The first witness is Tim Rennick, who is the founding executive director of the National Institute of Student Success at Georgia State University in Atlanta, Georgia. The second witness is Mr. Kevin Schultz, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Student Freedom Initiative in Washington, D.C. Our third witness is Ms. Lene Erickson, who is a Senior Vice President for the Social Policy, Education, and Politics at the Third Way in Washington, D.C. And our final witness is Dr. Lori Carroll, who is the Chancellor of University of Minnesota, Rochester. We thank the witnesses for being here today and for looking forward to your testimony. Pursuant to community rules, I would ask that you each limit your oral presentation to 5-minute summary of your written statement. I also like to remind the witnesses to be aware of their responsibilities to provide accurate information to the subcommittee. I first recognize Dr. Rennick.
Thank you. Chair Owens, Ranking Member Wilson, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, it's an honor to speak with you this morning. We all know that personalized attention is critical to student learning. The reality, though, is that historically higher education has done a poor job of delivering such personalized attention where it is most needed. Think about it for a moment. Year after year, students with the strongest academic credentials and the best financial resources are sent to elite colleges and universities with large endowments, small class sizes, and state-of-the-art facilities. Students with the weakest academic preparation and those from low-income backgrounds disproportionately attend community colleges and regional public universities, institutions often strapped for resources with large class sizes and overwhelmed staff. Is it any wonder that as a nation we have struggled to close the gap in post-secondary attainment between upper and lower income Americans? For much of my 30-year career at Georgia State University, I lived this reality. Georgia State is one of the largest minority-serving institutions in the country. Among our 52,000 students, 78% are non-white, almost 60% are Pell-eligible, and about 80% work while attending school. With a limited endowment and low tuition fees, Georgia State struggled for decades to provide students with the personalized supports they needed to succeed. For the first half of my career, Georgia State's graduation rate never rose much above 30%, and we were losing almost 6,000 students every year to attrition. The last decade, though, has seen transformative innovations in the field of student success. Georgia State has led a vanguard of institutions leveraging big data, AI, CRMs, chatbots, and other technologies to level the playing field by delivering systematic, personalized supports to students at scale. What does this look like in practice? Since 2012, Georgia State has used predictive analytics to monitor every student every day for 800 risk factors, with advisors reaching out to the students proactively when an alert is triggered. Since 2016, we have used an AI-enhanced texting platform to answer student questions 24/7, coaching them through FAFSA completion and helping them connect with tutoring and other resources. Our largest institutional aid program, Panther Retention Grants, uses predictive analytics to identify students who are at risk of dropping out for financial reasons and awards them microgrants to keep them enrolled, no application required. We're using data scraping tools to collect and share live career data about 170,000 Georgia State alumni with our first-year students, empowering them to make more informed decisions about majors and careers. In other words, Georgia State has begun to deliver personalized attention to students at scale. The collective impacts have been profound. Georgia State's graduation rate has increased by 70%, and we are graduating 3,500 more students every year than we were in 2010. Black, Hispanic, and low-income students are graduating at or above the rates of the student body overall. And Georgia State has become an engine of social mobility, ranking among the top institutions in the country for moving students out of poverty and into the upper half of American wage earners. The interventions not only work across demographics, they also work across institutions. In 2016, Georgia State was consolidated with the largest community college in Georgia, and we began to customize the initiatives to the new setting. Since then, graduation rates at the Perimeter College have more than tripled, and equity gaps have closed. These same approaches have produced similar results at a wide range of institutions, including Morgan State, UT San Antonio, FIU, Townsend, and so forth. These data-informed approaches can be self-sustaining, even revenue-generating, by helping institutions hold on to millions of dollars in tuition and fee revenues that previously were being hemorrhaged. But just as importantly, they are helping to transform communities and their economies. There are challenges. The technical expertise to implement these cutting-edge approaches is scarce among higher ed leaders. In my capacity as executive director of the new National Institute for Student Success, my team and I work every day with dozens of other campuses, helping them adapt these new approaches and providing practitioner-led training for periods ranging from 6 months to 3 years. Another challenge is that we are mounting this work against historically fierce headwinds. Due to the impacts of the pandemic on student learning, many NIST partner institutions are seeing 20 to 30% increases in failure rates in first-year college courses, with corresponding spikes in SAP issues. We are currently working with 9 institutions in the University Innovation Alliance to pilot evidence-based interventions as the students retake these courses during the summer after the freshman year. Finally, we need to find ways to make the new technologies fueling this work more accessible to even less resourced institutions. Many of the breakthroughs in the field of student success over the past decade spring from public-private partnerships. Georgia State was among the first clients with some of the key tech providers in the space, EAB, Mainstay, Stepping Blocks, allowing us to make quick gains in capabilities that would have been impossible through in-house efforts alone. The past decade has given us a roadmap on how to improve higher education and deliver personalized supports to students. It's time to follow this roadmap. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Rennick. I'd like to recognize now Mr. Schultz.
Good morning. Chairman Owens, Ranking Member Wilson, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I'm Keith Schultz, Chief Operating Officer of Student Freedom Initiative. Thank you for the opportunity to highlight programs at SFI and our contributions to helping students attending historically black colleges and universities and minority-serving institutions for tomorrow's opportunities. Our chairman, Robert F. Smith, created SFI as a 501c3 nonprofit to reduce the wealth gap in America through the lens of education for all students attending minority-serving institutions, following his historic gift to the young men at Morehouse College in 2019. SFI is evidence-based, student-centric, collaborative, and holistic. The holistic nature of SFI is seen through our pillars, which are available in part or in total based on the unique needs of institutions and their students. As a relative newcomer in this space, we are building on the fantastic work of many other nonprofits, corporate, federal, state, and local government programs. 100% of services that we provide are made possible through collaboration with institutions and generous contributions of our partners. In addition to Robert F. Smith, Fund 2 Foundation, I want to specifically call out Cisco for their $150 million contribution to the enabling mission of Student Freedom Initiative. Other significant donors include Prudential Financial, Walmart, Capital One, First Republic, Jane Street, and many others. The first pillar in our program is the alternative to Parent Plus loans. Its objective is to provide a more flexible financing option only after other sources of financial aid have been satisfied. The eligible students are juniors and seniors, majoring in science, technology, engineering, and math. Students can receive up to $20,000 per year, an interest rate below Parent Plus loans, and repayment terms based on their income. And their repayment is providing the equivalent benefit for future students. SFI has dispersed an average of $12,000 to over just under 300 students for a total of $3.3 million since inception. The second pillar is internships and certifications, and its objective is to increase students' job readiness. The internxl.org platform allows employers to obtain diverse, curated talent of highly trained and educated students who are ready to step into their job on day one. The third pillar is comprehensive supports, and its objectives is to increase student persistence. I'd like to highlight one of the particular programs in this particular area, and it's our microgrants program. Based on institution-approved one-time emergencies, based on the generous philanthropy of Prudential Financial, we supplement existing institutional resources up to 75% or a maximum of $500 per student per semester. SFI has dispersed an average of $411 to just under 300 students for, again, a total of approximately $36,000. The fourth pillar is MSI capacity building, and its objective is to increase the resilience and competitiveness of our member institutions. In collaboration with Cisco and the participating institutions, SFI conducts cybersecurity investigations and reviews, identifies gaps, provides the necessary technology to mitigate these gaps, provides at least 12 months worth of maintenance, and provides the ongoing planning to support long-term maintenance of those delivered capabilities. SFI supports 45 historically black colleges and universities with the potential to expand to tribally connected colleges and universities in the future. Mr. Chairman, in summary, SFI has created partnerships with over 56 minority-serving institutions. We're in 20 states and have the potential to positively impact 200,000 students. We believe the key performance indicators co-created with stakeholders, coupled with collaborative partnerships amongst philanthropists, foundations, corporations, federal, state, and local governments, is worth considering as an effective, scalable, long-term solution to preparing today's students for tomorrow's opportunities. We acknowledge the challenge before us, but as a 25-year veteran of the United States military, more than a decade of private sector experience, and collaborating with our strategic partners, I'm convinced more than ever that collectively we can address these challenges with solutions that have co-created key performance indicators, are scalable, and implemented through proven accelerants, that being partnerships. Thank you again for the opportunity to share with the committee the initiatives underway at Student Freedom Initiative. And I'd like to wish the fathers, the sons, the daughters, and the mothers of men a happy Father's Day. This concludes my formal remarks, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Scholes. I'd like to now introduce Ms. Erickson.
Good morning, Chairman Owens, Ranking Member Wilson, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. My name is Lene Erickson, and I am a Senior Vice President at Third Way, a national policy think tank, where I lead our work to ensure that our nation's higher education system leaves all students better off than they were when they started and prepared to contribute to our workforce and our economy. I am here today with my colleague Michelle Domino, who I'd like to thank for helping me put together the materials we are bringing to you today. For too long, the federal government has focused only on increasing college access, without asking whether students and taxpayers are getting a real return on their investment. I welcome this hearing and appreciate your attention to what today's students truly need to succeed in earning valuable higher education credentials that set them on a path to make a good living and pay back their student loans. In our fast-changing world, innovation is imperative. The needs of college students have changed at lightning speed over the past few years and will no doubt continue to evolve. This is in part due to our success in improving access to higher education. Today's students are more representative of our nation than ever before. Over half are first generation in their families to attend college, just as I was. About a third receive federal Pell Grants, just as I did. 40% are students of color, 40% are employed while they're attending school, and 1 in 5 are parents. It is a testament to the value higher education affords that we have seen these shifts in enrollment. Students are working hard to be able to fit college into their lives, and innovative institutional practices can help them reach their educational and career goals. But improving student outcomes across every federally funded higher education program must be this committee and our top priority. We know that a quality post-secondary credential is the surest way to secure upward mobility and a financially secure life. And that's exactly why students go to college in the first place. The number one reason students pursue higher education is to get a good job and move up the income ladder. Unfortunately, our laissez-faire approach to higher education has left too many students with little to show for one of the biggest investments they will make in their lifetime. Colleges and universities graduate only about 6 in 10 of the students they enroll, and about a quarter at 4-year schools and 40% at 2-year schools. Students do not go on to earn more than the average high school graduate, even a decade after they've enrolled. It is imperative that we make space for experimentation and innovation, and that we evaluate those interventions so we can see if they truly get more students across the finish line with a quality credential. But innovation must contribute to, not come at the expense of, ensuring strong student outcomes, especially for those students that have been long underserved by our higher education system. An especially promising step in this direction has been increased federal attention to scaling evidence-based student support initiatives that are already proven to improve college completion rates and other student outcomes. Models like CUNY ASAP and Bottom Line provide students with comprehensive support that help them succeed academically and navigate personal and financial barriers to earning a college degree. Rigorous evaluation of these models have shown their effectiveness in helping students persist and graduate. Leaving college with a degree in hand makes all of the difference. College graduates are equipped to fill the high-demand jobs in our economy right away and have significantly lower rates of student default. Congress recognized the tremendous potential of models like these through its investment in the Postsecondary Student Success Program, which helps institutions invest in data-driven reforms to improve retention and completion. The Department of Education has received $45 million in funding for fiscal year 2023, and more increased funding would pave the way for fruitful experimentation and evaluation of new promising practices. Well, several innovative models we will discuss today may show promise, but they also require careful attention to evaluating the evidence behind them and ensuring key quality assurance measures are in place. As Congress considers expanding Pell Grants to short-term programs, it must also craft careful guardrails to protect students from predatory programs that could leave them worse off than they were when they enrolled. With more and more students drawn to online education, we must do more to ensure quality across these programs. And with student debt rising, we are all searching for new ways to make college affordable, but Congress must ensure that newer financing models like income share agreements are subject to appropriate oversight and clearly communicated to consumers. The purpose and potential of the Higher Education Act has historically been, and still should be, providing a pathway to success for all students. Congress and all of us must do more to deliver on that promise for today's students. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Erickson. Last but not least, I'd like to recognize Dr. Carroll.
Chair Owens, Ranking Member Wilson, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony. It's an honor to appear before you. I'm Lori Carroll, Chancellor of the innovative University of Minnesota Rochester, a new public university with a vision to inspire transformation in higher education through innovations that empower our graduates to solve the grand health challenges of the 21st century. I also co-direct the National College in 3 Design Experiment with Robert Zemsky, professor at the University of Pennsylvania. Together, we are authors of Communicate for a Change, Revitalizing Conversations for Higher Education, and the forthcoming College in 3, an overdue conversation about reducing costs and improving quality. For both the Rochester campus and the College in 3 experiment, we are committed to 3 design principles. Students are at the center, research informs practice, and partners make it possible. The topic of this hearing is our daily work on my campus and in the College in 3 experiment. Currently, half of all 4-year American colleges and universities across the U.S. lose a quarter or more of their first-year students before they progress to their second year. This outcome is unacceptable, and we who serve students pursuing higher education are well positioned to lead the change in partnership with accreditors, policymakers, and employers. We need not just new, but dramatically different designs to achieve dramatically different results. That change is the audacious aspiration of the College in 3 experiment, which is supported by a team of advisors that include multiple accreditors. The College in 3 goal is to encourage stable institutions to provide additional options, shortening the time required to earn a baccalaureate degree to 3 years and enhancing student success, innovating at the nexus of cost and quality. 12 campus pilots, both public and private, have experimented for the last 2 years, hosting broad campus conversations to ask big questions about the cost and outcomes of college, interacting with employer partners, and ultimately designing college degree options that are both better and less expensive. We've learned a lot, that campus conversations to design 3-year options are not only possible, but have been invigorating, even in this time of disruption. We've learned that stable institutions can decrease student costs while also sustaining financial viability. We've learned that evidence-based learning design is imperative to enhance student outcomes. We've learned that employers can contribute as faculty develop the necessary curricular designs. We've learned that there are multiple paths to 3-year degree designs, including block scheduling, course bundling around challenges or problems, year-round advising plans that optimize summer term for degree progress, embedded 4-credit experiential learning provided with employer partners, competency-based programs, and a tradition challenging fewer than 120 credit hour approach as well. and we will continue to learn as we study the prototype College in 3 Design Next Gen Med, launched in fall 2022 as a year-round option, providing a fast-track, lower-cost University of Minnesota undergraduate degree in partnership with Mayo Clinic. High-integrity College in 3 designs like this one hold the potential to decrease student cost and increase student success, including completion of degrees in areas of critical workforce demand. As the experiment's momentum builds, the opportunity to scale these designs would be strengthened by experimental site status. We respectfully request your advocacy for such an opportunity, as we who develop human potential take responsibility to craft new options for a new era. Thank you, Chair Owens, Ranking Member Wilson, and members of this subcommittee for your time and attention today and for your service to our nation every day. We share the aspiration to do better for America's college students. I'm grateful and honored to provide this testimony and look forward to answering your questions and hearing your comments.
Thank you again to witnesses for being here. Under the Committee Rule 9, we will now begin questioning our witness under the 5-minute rule. I will begin this process. Mr. Schultz, innovative financing is often the lane of innovation that is overlooked, but I'd like to highlight that here today. The Student Freedom Initiative has launched an alternative to the Parent Plus loan. This income contingent private loan is offered because of SFI's understanding that encouraging individuals and families to borrow well above their ability to repay amounts to a predatory debt trap. In your testimony, you stated, and I quote, "Black students have 2 times the average debt, hold debt twice as long, and are 5 times more likely to default after graduation compared to their white counterparts," end quote. Unfortunately, the Parent Plus loans have become a debt trap to many families. Can you tell us more about the SFI's alternative to the Parent Plus loan and why alternative private financing is a better option for the last dollar financing?
Yes, thank you for your question, Chairman. The Student Freedom Initiative initiated the what we call the alternative to Parent Plus loans. Again, it's for juniors and seniors, so it's very narrowly defined, juniors and seniors. It's not for all majors, so it's for science, technology, engineering, and math, because as we were doing our research, that's where the jobs were, and that's what industry required. So we focused on juniors and seniors majoring in STEM. We recognized that we wanted to provide an alternative, another option that could be made available after the other alternatives that were available to some students were exhausted, because we recognized there's no one size fits all, and so we wanted to make certain that there was an alternative to what was traditionally made available for students who had this type of need. So it's used after the other source of financial aid have been exhausted and there's still a need. The benefit is provided. It's $20,000 per year for each student. Their repayment terms are pretty flexible in terms of when they start paying. There's an income below which there is no payment. But more importantly, what we've done is we've raised a large amount of private capital to actually fund it, because as we were doing our research, we realized that existing HBCUs and some minority serving institutions couldn't use their endowment to fund something like this, so we went to the private sector to actually provide the funding. And the way that the model works is as students are paying back into the fund, it's actually paying for benefit of future students. So as a non-for-profit, the money doesn't come in for a profit motive or anything like that. It actually is funneled back in through the means by which to actually make the funds available for future students. So that's basically the basic model. We've got some 56 institutions that are participating in the program in schools from Florida to Georgia to almost every state. We've got about 23 states that have schools that are participating in the program, but that's the basic model. And again, it's really intended to replace the Parent Plus loan. It's intended to provide an alternative. It's focused on juniors and seniors and those who are majoring in science, technology, engineering, and math.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz, appreciate that. Dr. Carroll, you mentioned in your testimony the College in 3 experiment has 12 participating institutions. What did it take to get those 12 together and through your conversations, and how did each arrive to the conclusion that the reworking degree programs is a necessary step for these institutions to better serve their students?
We used professional and personal networks to begin conversations with presidents and provosts across the country, and we currently have more campuses interested in being pilots than we can manage. So we selected 12 for their diversity from one another to have public and private together. The presidents and provosts worked to gather collaborative, creative faculty design teams and hosted broad campus conversations to explore the purpose and value of college, and particularly what a college graduate should know and be able to do in the 21st century, right at graduation. And those conversations propelled the project forward as faculty design teams became invigorated.
Thank you. In the few seconds we have left, Dr. Rennick, you mentioned the contracts with data companies like Mainstay, Stepping Blocks are vital for, quote, allowing to make quick gains in technical capabilities that would have been impossible through in-house efforts alone. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit on that in the time we have left?
Absolutely. The reality is that the technical expertise needed to run some of these cutting-edge programs with predictive analytics, CRMs, AI, and so forth are not easily accessible at the post-secondary level. What Georgia State has done very aggressively is partner with new startups as they're beginning to develop these technologies. The benefits are twofold. One, we can often get these products and systems for less costs, but more importantly, we can be part of the design. Because while the tech field has great expertise in the technology, they often don't understand the life cycle of the students and the reality of day-to-day challenges that they're facing. So these are true tech partnerships with public institutions like Georgia State.
Thank you so much. I'd now like to recognize the ranking member for the purpose of questioning the witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Schultz, I'm a lifelong educator and a champion for young black boys to interrupt the school-to-prison pipeline. It is my understanding that your initiative, Student Freedom Initiative, came about as a result of the 2019 payoff of Morehouse College by Robert Smith. But they didn't have to pay him back. And then during my time, I make sure that 100 boys go to college debt-free, and they don't own any debt when they finish, just through influence and raising money. So tell me this, what services do you provide to Florida's HBCUs?
Currently, we have within our program, amongst those that I identified previously, Florida A&M is one of the programs that's in the sponsored program. All those organizations or institutions who choose to be can be a member of the Student Freedom Initiative. So there's no impediment. So all of the schools, in fact, we'd really like to have Georgia State next to us because of the number of minority students that they graduate. But all HBCUs and minority-serving institutions in the state of Florida are eligible to participate in any one or all of the pillars of the program.
So you presently serve as Florida A&M University students?
We currently serve Florida A&M University as one of the schools that's included within the existing program. Yes.
In Florida?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Erickson, many dual enrollment programs, particularly those that use high school instructors certified as adjunct faculty, are finding it difficult to locate qualified instructors. What strategies can Congress support to address teacher shortages that inhibit greater access to dual enrollment?
Thank you for the question. I, for a long time, worked on an initiative at Third Way to modernize the teaching profession, to make it a place where our highest quality students want to continue their career. I think we all know that pay is a component of that, but also respect is a component of that, and treating teachers as the professionals that they are, elevating the teaching profession to show that it is a place where if you are a high achiever, you might want to go into that role. And then, of course, raising the wages so that across the life cycle of a teacher, they can remain in that profession rather than having to leave when they may become a breadwinner to support a family. I think we need to do all of those things to support our teachers across the country, and particularly post-pandemic, where we've seen teachers take on so much more stress and so many more roles. The last point I would say is to really fund support staff at schools so that teachers can do the job of teaching and not have to do all of the other jobs that we require of them in so many places right now. So I would say fully fund Title I, increase Title I funding, and really invest in modernizing our teaching profession to make it the high-quality, respected profession that it can and should be.
Thank you. How do you think policymakers can create a system that fosters equitable education access to dual enrollment? And what are the biggest challenges that an institution ensues?
I think one of the biggest challenges for equity in dual enrollment programs is inequity in our K-12 system. If you have a school that is poorly funded, that doesn't have the resources to establish a dual enrollment program with a local higher education program, then those students are not going to have access to an innovation that we know can really improve their student success. So dual enrollment programs are phenomenal, and they're mostly available to students right now who we know would succeed anyways. So I think we really need to focus on our Title I schools, investing in the places that the students really need that leg up for economic mobility, and then getting them into the research-tested programs like we have here that show a pathway to student success, that are evidence-based, that are not built on a hypothesis, but are built on real evidence and research of showing student success.
Okay. How does chronic underfunding impact the ability of institutions like HBCUs to engage in scaling up innovative practices, these innovative practices that we're talking about today?
It's a huge problem. In our K-12 system, we realize that we need Title I to help to overcome those inequities. And in our higher education system, we basically have a voucher system where Harvard gets the same Pell Grant that an HBCU would get. And that's where we really need to focus the investment of things like Title III, Title V, but also potentially create more avenues to invest in the institutions that are really doing the hard work of providing mobility to our students.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to request unanimous consent to enter into the record 6 recommendations for making dual enrollment programs more equitable from the Education Trust.
So ordered.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Erickson.
Thank you.
Thank you. Real quickly, Ms. Schultz, my dad worked for 40 years at Florida A&M, so I grew up in the shadows, and I'm excited to hear this innovation is coming to that area. So thank you so much for that. I'd like now, I have Mr. Garfman.
I'm going to go a little different direction here. In my state days as state legislator, we learned that students who begin at a local college, live with their parents for 2 or 3 years, and then switch to a 4-year college, and they have them both in Wisconsin, do better than kids who leave to go away right away. My guess is it has something to do with the lifestyle of 18-year-olds who are living apart from their parents for the first time. Are we doing a good job out there in getting kids to, I assume most places like Wisconsin have universities that are near where someone went to high school, and we have 26 public universities in Wisconsin, maybe that's high. Are we doing a good job? Could you comment on that, both as a way to save money and to lessen the chances that you're going to be a dropout? We'll take Mr. Schultz.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your question. One of the things that we did as we were working through the development of the program is we did a driving tour, Dr. Mark Brown and I, of South Carolina. One of those institutions we attended was Benedict there in South Carolina, and they actually have most of the students who attend are right there within their neighborhood. And one of the examples that she actually gave was during the pandemic, there was a student who came from fragile economic background and kept coming to our office saying, when is school going to open? And what we found out is that student came from a fragile economic background, just as you indicated. They were actually living in their car and doing their homework at Chick-fil-A. And so they went to the local school because that was the place where they could actually be in an environment that was comfortable to them and they could actually excel. And that person later graduated with an engineering degree and so forth. So there are students who actually attend locally where they are. And in that case, in the case of Benedict, that was one of the examples.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is, sometimes we over-focus on kids with, economically disadvantaged and forget about the middle-class kid. I think what I learned in Wisconsin is, even for an average kid who's staying at home for 2 years, you will both do better academically if you go to a college within driving distance, and you will also save money, so less of a chance that you wind up in debt. Is that something anybody is recommending, or do you believe I am right in both of those? Well, we'll say, Dr. Carroll?
We find that the key variable for students succeeding is sense of belonging. And so in what you've described, that sense of belonging is coming from family and neighbors.
Okay, does anybody even keep track of this stuff? I'll put it that way. Okay, we happen to keep track of it in Wisconsin because we have these two-year universities. We have people representing kind of the educational establishment here. I believe, based on experiences in Wisconsin, that kids in general would do better staying at home for the first 2 years because they're less to adapt to party lifestyle, so they do better academically, and they would save money. Are there studies confirming that, or do we not even do studies on that topic?
Sir, if I could jump in, there are studies and they show a wide variance depending on how well the systems interact with each other. So in Wisconsin, you might have a fantastic system that interacts well between the community colleges and a four-year program, but in other states, they've seen actually that students who start at two-year programs that then want to transfer to a four-year program do worse because those systems haven't linked up to make those
they should
credits
be,
transfer.
But do we do a study with systems that do link up? I mean,
Yes.
I think,
Yeah, there's a
in
lot of-
those systems, I can rattle off in my head all the public universities in Illinois. Do we do a study in which we can tell a kid and his parents that you would be better off, you might not have as much fun, but you'd be better off spending the first 2 years at the local college?
I can comment that the financial benefit in the state of Georgia is about a 40% reduction in the total cost of a bachelor's degree if a student starts in the first 2 years of their career at a community college or a two-year institution and then transfers in. And one of the things we've done at Georgia State through consolidating with our largest community college partner is hardwire the benefits of that program so that the students can seamlessly progress from the two-year to the four-year.
And I'm getting near the clock running out here, but what I'm going to ask you, when you compare two groups of kids, say in Wisconsin, both going the first 2 years to UW Sheboygan or something and going the last 2 years to UW Green Bay, do the kids who start with 2 years at home do better or worse in their third or fourth year than the kids who went away from school immediately?
What we've done with Georgia State, and we have looked at these data very carefully, is get to the point where the students who make this transfer from community college to Georgia State compared to those who start at Georgia State are graduating at the same rates. And that's a good accomplishment, that they're equal in accomplishment, even though the cost for the students who start at the community college is about 40% less.
Thank you. Well, I hope we publicize that.
Thank you. Mr. Ticano?
Yes, thank you.
California.
Mr. Grothman, that discussion was very interesting to me. As a former community college trustee, I've noted that many of our community college transfers into the UCs actually do better. So it's, in many cases, they do just as well. I think there's a bipartisan interest in dual enrollment programs, both in terms of folks that can finish high school with 2 years of community college under their belt and go, matriculate straight into a four-year university. Many of those students want to actually do those 4 years in addition, or maybe get a head start on a master's degree. So I would recommend that we actually kind of look at, as a committee, do some site visits to early college high schools, look at Dr. Botstein's work at Bard College and the Bard College experiments in Lower Manhattan. I think we could see, not only from the savings point of view, but from the effectiveness of challenging young people much earlier in high school. So I think this is a good bipartisan topic for us. Now, we've heard today about the types of students that competency-based education providers are serving. We've heard a lot about working adult students, first-generation students, and students of color. As you know, these students are so often aggressively recruited by low-quality for-profit institutions that charge too much for a degree not worth the paper it's printed on. Given the rapid growth of competency-based education programs and providers, it seems clear that some companies see this as a business opportunity. Now, are there ways that Congress, we can make sure that we do not allow students who have been historically underserved by our educational systems to be taken advantage of in our desire to adopt new models and approaches? This question is from Ms. Erickson.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Takano. And this committee is really lovely because you have former educators on it. It's nice to hear that conversation. So I think that this is exactly the right question, and it is where our desire for innovation and experimentation really needs to come together with guardrails. So I think that already we have within the Higher Education Act the Experimental Sites Authority, which Dr. Carroll mentioned as well, where we can actually pilot things. We can say something that's required under current law or regulations maybe is holding folks back. Let's test it and see if that's true or not. And then let's see how the students do. And I think, importantly, we need to see how disaggregated groups of students do in those programs, because it might be the case that some students who perform very well, say coding camp that's recruiting Harvard undergrads, looks pretty good because they're Harvard graduates that they're recruiting into those programs, but might actually perform incredibly poorly for another group of students. And I think that is really why we need to also pass the College Transparency Act, so that we can really have that access to the data to see which students are you serving well with this program, and are you in fact seeing folks trying to innovate in order to just make more money off of students, or are they really invested in student success?
Thank you for that. Well, Congress needs to be responsible and cautious about authorizing competency-based education in statute. And while there are benefits of high-quality innovations, there are also risks to both students and taxpayers in any new model of higher education that isn't focused on outcomes. So, Ms. Erickson, can you tell us more about what makes a quality CBE program and what kinds of things we should be looking for to ensure that programs put students first?
Absolutely. I think the upside of the CBE opportunity is that it can provide relevancy and flexibility so that we're meeting our workforce needs as they change, and also allowing people to not have to sit their butts in a seat for a certain amount of hours, but really be able to show that they can do the work, that they know the material and can move on. But I think we also need to make sure that those students are getting a high quality education. And one of the things that we learned during COVID is that online programs have real limitations. They have opportunities, but they have limitations. And as a person who was living in a house with an 8th grader and a 5th grader going to school online, there were some real limitations there when our schools were closed for a long time in Virginia. And so I think we need to make sure that particularly with those online programs, we are encouraging regular and substantive interaction with educators who are accredited and trained to do that interaction, so that essentially taxpayers aren't just funding a very expensive YouTube video.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Erickson. And Mr. Chairman, this is a very interesting hearing to me. I'm sorry that my time is up and I yield back. There's so many more questions I have of the witnesses. This is a great lineup.
Thank you, and I too agree. I love this bipartisan process. We'll get this thing done. Okay, I'd like to recognize Mr. Banks from Indiana.
Dr. Rennick, does Georgia State offer any AI-related degrees?
We offer a number of degrees in analytics and predictive use of data, but not AI degrees currently.
Are there plans to or discussions at the university
There are
level of what
discussions.
type of academic degrees might be useful to students as we prepare for what we know will be a very disruptive moment in the American labor market with artificial intelligence and what that will do to our economy? Can you just elaborate more on what those discussions are like at the university level of what those degrees might lead to?
Yeah, sure. There are not only discussions, active discussions of degrees in AI, but also discussion about degrees in the ethics of AI and some of the social and political implications of it as well. And these sorts of programs are being developed, not just at Georgia State, but across a number of other institutions nationally. I think it's important to distinguish different uses of AI as we apply it in higher education. And just to be clear, when I talk about Georgia State using AI as we are on a day-to-day basis, this is not generative AI. It's not ChatGPT that is generating novel content by the AI itself. We're using AI in order to help us direct appropriate information to our students from vetted knowledge base. So what AI does is when a student asks a question via text, it goes into the knowledge base and pulls out the appropriate answer rather than generating an answer in and of itself. And this is one of the ethical components that we've worked through at Georgia State to make sure that the content we're giving to our students is something that we know is correct and vetted.
Understood. But you do envision that in a short period of time there will be specific degree programs at universities like yours directly related to artificial intelligence, how to use it, how to implement it in the labor market to create new jobs that are going to, from the jobs that will be eliminated.
Absolutely. I fully expect that.
I'm glad you brought up ChatGPT. A recent survey found that 43% of college students say that they've used AI tools like ChatGPT, and half of those admit to using it to complete assignments or exams. So that's nearly 1 in 5 college students who admit to using AI to complete their coursework. Are there instances at Georgia State where a student was caught unethically using AI and on a major assignment or exam? Can you talk about some of the ethics related to that and how you've dealt with situations like those?
Yeah, I'm not directly involved in the teaching component any longer at Georgia State. I'm now the director of the National Institute for Student Success. So ChatGPT is a relatively new phenomenon. What our strategy will be going forward is to make sure that we are using the tools in a way that can support the student's educational development. I mean, we faced this issue decades ago with the emergence of calculators and other things in math courses. We're going to have to find ways in which we can generate assignments that are high level and that allow the students to show what the work that they actually can do.
But can you be more specific? I mean, how are schools talking about eliminating the opportunities for cheating in assignments or exams using ChatGPT? How do we stop that?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a blanket way to stop cheating with ChatGPT or any other sort of mechanism. There are discussions going on, but recognize ChatGPT is a very new phenomenon. We're talking about the last 6 months. So thinking that we have now figured out and developed policies to deal with it, it may be a little premature, but these discussions are actually
Dr.
going
Carroll, any thoughts on that? How do we stop cheating with ChatGPT and other types of
We will need
AI?
to adapt. There are, relatively new, in this last semester, developments related to ChatGPT. And we've seen some early studies showing that it is possible to discern the difference, and some others that are saying it is not possible to discern the difference. So we need to adapt, and certainly it's important that we do not allow for cheating. At the same time, AI holds promise for helping us track data at scale and to help more students succeed. So is it diabolical or is it divine? We are on the route to discover that as we move forward together collectively.
Yeah, I think I agree, but it doesn't seem like there's a specific resolution or any recommendations that you have on that note. Maybe if you think about some, you can let us know later. Thank you. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Ms. McBeth from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our panel of witnesses for being here today and making this hearing possible. I have read your testimonies, and ensuring our higher education and workforce systems operate hand in hand is incredibly important, and we must do more to make sure that our students are being encouraged to take advantage of all opportunities that are afforded them. This only helps to better themselves, but also their finances and their families, and economically the future of our communities, but also ensure that our people have the skills necessary to fill these in-demand sectors of the economy and help the American communities compete. While there are other viable ways to get there, like a registered apprenticeship, a college degree, or credential, is still the best and most successful pathway to economic security. And we're seeing that play out in real time in Georgia, at Georgia State. I do represent Georgia, and thank you so much for being here today, where they have been ranked among the top institutions in the nation for helping students to lift themselves not just out of poverty, but also into the upper half of the earners economically in the country. Almost 60% of Georgia State students are Pell eligible, and almost 80% of them are non-white, and they work while they're actually going to school. That's admirable. The education system is supposed to serve as a ladder for economic mobility, and GSU has learned in this mission to do that very thing, and we've seen incredibly promising results out of Georgia State University. They've increased their graduation rate by 70% just since 2010. Using this institutional aid program known as the Panther Retention Grants, they go out of their way to identify students who are at risk of dropping out because of the cost of the education and award them small grants to ensure that they stay enrolled and that they actually complete graduation. And I'm also glad to have them in my home state and here on the Hill today to show the rest of the country their important work. Dr. Rennick, I have 2 questions for you today. At the beginning of the pandemic, the University System of Georgia sustained a 10% cut of roughly $230 million that was never, ever restored. The state recently went even further and had additional cuts of $600 million from next year's budget, which translates to about $8 million cut for Georgia's largest university system, Georgia State. In your testimony, you mentioned that regional public universities are oftentimes stripped of their resources with large classes and overwhelmed staff. Do cuts like these make it more difficult for you to accomplish your mission and to get the positive results that we've seen at GSU? We want to continue to see those results, and is this more difficult because of these kinds of cuts?
Yeah, thank you, Representative. The budget challenges in Georgia and other states that the institute I direct are working with are a day-to-day challenge. It's shifting sands from one month to the next. One doesn't know what the budget will be, but typically they've been going down as far as state appropriations are concerned. What we're doing is working at Georgia State to make sure that we prioritize the interventions we know by evidence to make the big difference. And we're happy to say that while students are struggling as they arrive at Georgia State in numbers higher than was the case prior to the pandemic, that we continue to set records for graduation rates even into the pandemic because these kind of systematic supports work. One thing I'm messaging to the presidents and the leadership of other institutions we're working with at the Institute, we have about 40 schools we're working with right now, is if you're facing budget cuts, where those budget cuts could best be made. And the knee-jerk reaction oftentimes is to cut the support staff, the advisors, the counselors, the financial aid staff and so forth, which in many ways is shoot yourself in the foot because these are the very people on a campus who will help generate the tuition and the revenues that will sustain these institutions.
Thank you. And I have one more question for you. Georgia State provides 4-year degrees to predominantly Black and minority students, more than any other institution in the nation. In your testimony, you also mentioned efforts that you've taken to make this happen. Can you expound upon that just a little bit more for us about all the work that you're doing at Georgia State to ensure that students have access to strong education and that they graduate on time and get connected to high-quality, good-paying jobs?
Yeah, the reality is that over the last decade, Georgia State has conferred more bachelor's degrees to Black students than any other college or university in the United States. So these approaches work. They work across the demographic spectrum. Since we're short on time, what I'll say is a key part of our strategy is to take what used to be optional supports, where students would have to take time out of their day to seek help, to find an office, to connect with support, and hardwire that into the student experience. So every student who attends Georgia State will get exposed to career capabilities and to counseling, will get access to tutoring and so forth, will get these micro grants if they run into problems and are at risk of dropping out for financial reasons. These are just systematically delivered to all students, and when we did so, and we've run randomized control trials that confirm this, although the supports are available to all students equally, it's oftentimes the students from underserved backgrounds who benefit the most from that systematic approach, including our Black students.
Thank you. I'm out of time, and go Panthers.
Thank you.
Mr. Good, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses for being here. And I have been in your stadium, Dr. Rennick. And so my first question is unrelated to that visit, but for you. In your testimony, you mentioned that Georgia State made use of small dollar grants funded by alumni and private donors. How could this model be used more broadly by schools to reduce costs for students?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we just finished a longitudinal study of over 70,000 students. We looked at them from 2013 to 2021, and one result was particularly sobering. If a student stops out of college for even a single semester for financial reasons, their chances of graduating go down by about 50 percentage points. The difference between graduating at 75% rate to a 25% rate. So this Panther Retention Grant Program, which we initiated a decade ago, is designed to use data to identify, oftentimes before the student, him or herself, realizes they're going to be on a pathway to dropping out for financial reasons, provide them the counseling and then small microgrants. The microgrants only average $900 each, but we've given over 19,000 of these grants out. And every year now, about 1,300 of the students who walk across the stage at that stadium that you've had the chance of visiting are recipients of the microgrants. What it indicates is we need to be a lot more flexible and data-oriented in the way we award aid. That if we were trying to support every Georgia State student for 4 years fully with institutional aid, we'd be overwhelmed. But by looking at students who are close to graduating, looking at the data to see where the small grant will make the big difference, we've been able to get over 80% of the recipients of these microgrants to graduate from Georgia State.
That's incredible results there. So you mentioned the 70,000 number. When you analyze 70,000 students, you mean over the decade at Georgia State
That's right. These are 70,000 students across 8 years of enrollment at Georgia State.
Approximately what percentage or number of students do you think, or would you say have been totally impacted by this? I guess you gave a number, but what percentage of the total is that's been able to be helped by these Panther grants?
Yeah, and this was part of the longitudinal study of those 70,000 students. If a student received the grant, then they graduated from Georgia State at about a 75% clip. So we're talking about, over the course of the life of this program, well over 10,000 students that have graduated who otherwise would have been stopped out and unlikely to return to complete their degrees.
So would it be 1 out of approximately 7 then? 10,000 out of the 70,000 that you looked at? Would that be
80% of the students who get the grants are graduating on time, and we've given out 19,000 of these grants total.
Why do you think more colleges aren't using this approach? Do they not know about it? Is there resistance? What do you think the reason would be we don't see and hear about this at other schools more commonly?
I think there are a couple challenges. One is that we do need to do a better job of sharing best practices. That's one of the reasons that we founded this National Institute for Student Success, where we work with campuses to implement these changes. But it does require good data. It requires you to be able to understand which students are at financial risk, which students are at risk of falling out of compliance with SAP, which ones are running out of eligibility for state or federal grants and so forth, and to be on top of it, because once the student leaves our institution, the inertia is very hard to reverse. It's hard to bring the student back once they stop out.
That was my experience as a student a long time ago. If they left for a period of time, they rarely returned. Dr. Carroll, just to pivot to you for a moment, you talked about college in 3 programs. Can you just talk about the impact that this has on costs and college debt for students, how this helps them?
Absolutely. So the savings for students are up to 1 full year. If they're residential students, that includes not only tuition and fees, but also any costs for their residents. In addition, most of these programs have embedded paid internships, and because the degree time is shorter, they begin their lifetime earnings as a professional sooner as well. So the overall financial benefit is quite significant.
You know, you could argue that our cultural model for college to begin with, go to college to experience college, to figure out what you might want to do, is really upside down, if you will. Why would other institutions or some institutions be opposed to this model, the College in 3 program, do you think?
There are institutions and many of us within higher education who want to ensure that any such program is focused on learning, transformative learning, and is using evidence-based practice. So the idea of simply lopping off some credits is not what College in 3 is about. We're working to use evidence-based design that's focused on student learning and development to make not only a shorter program, but a better program. And that's a reason that some might be fearful of attempting a 3-year degree.
it's my time's up, but in my experience, the more immersed and saturated and more intense the program, the more you retain and the more that it benefits you, actually. It's the exact opposite of stretching it out, the result of when you stretch it out. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Good. And I want to take a short point of personal privilege here. I read the book, Won't Lose the Stream, about the program at Georgia. And if you read it, you'll see that many schools could do the same thing that Georgia State has done, but they don't do it because they don't have the people there willing to change to do what they've done. Short point of personal privilege. Thank you very much. Dr. Adams.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to to Ms. Wilson as well for calling this meeting. I just want to, before I begin, just say, Mr. Schultz, I'm very familiar with what you all are doing. We certainly appreciate that. I'm very interested in your pillars and how that's working. Curious about what schools you might be working with in North Carolina.
We've got North Carolina. Thank you for your question, ma'am. Thank you very much. Just as a note, I was just sharing with Dr. Riddick, his program was one of the bases for our microgrant program that we have with Prudential, right? Fully funded by Prudential to provide microgrants directly to the HBCUs, including North Carolina Central, as one of those schools we have in North Carolina. So,
Right.
So that's kind of one of those we have.
Well, thank you very much for that, and thank you for your work. I am a graduate twice of North Carolina A&T. 40 years I spent on the campus of Bennett College, so I'm very interested in higher education. So, Ms. Erickson, studies have shown the power of dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment in early college, high school programs, and improving college access and success. So, and I've read your testimony as well. So are you aware of any institutions that commit to students not incurring costs associated with participating in dual enrollment or early college programs? And can you discuss the importance of financially supporting students in dual enrollment programs?
Absolutely. I'm not aware of any specific schools that are doing that. Dr. Carroll might have more information about that. But I will say, finances are an important part of being able to be successful in higher education, obviously. But I think what we're learning from some of these studies and evidence that we've gathered from many of these successful programs is that it's only one piece. You also need to create cohorts so that students have a sense of belonging. You also need to help them navigate, oftentimes, what it means to structure a course load that will get them to the right place at the right time. As we've talked about, about half of students are first-generation college students, and they might not have access to the kind of social capital to know how to navigate these complex decisions. And so I think we should absolutely focus on the dual enrollment piece and really speeding up the time in college to whatever extent we can in the way that Dr. Carroll talked about, which is really focused on learning. But I also think it's important to think about institutional incentives. And what we've done so far in higher education is essentially incentivize institutions to enroll students and then had really no incentives whatsoever for them to actually make sure they succeeded. And I think it's really important that this Congress has authorized the Postsecondary Success Grants that is now really thinking about how do we get more schools to do what Georgia State is doing and say, I'm not just going to get paid when I get that butt in the seat. I'm going to get paid when that person gets out, is successful, is able to get a job and pay back their loans. And we know there a lot of the institutions that are doing the yeoman's work of educating underserved students don't have the money or resources to just put that outlay out there. And so I think, the College Completion Fund is a really big step in that direction.
Thank you. So let me ask, what role do you see four-year colleges and universities, especially in partnership with community colleges and other providers, in promoting solutions in terms of driving innovation in higher education?
I think community colleges are a backbone of our system and are serving so many of the students that otherwise might not automatically succeed within a higher education system. But what we need to do is make sure that we're syncing up those two systems. We know that community colleges do incredible work, but we also know that having a four-year degree is actually the best way to ensure economic mobility, particularly for underserved students. So making sure that those systems talk to each other, that you can transfer any credits that you got at your local community college to another system is super important, because many students, I think most who enroll in community college at the outset say they want a 4-year degree, and that's just where they're starting. So we need to think about that
So
more.
thank you very much, and before I run out of time, I just want to, I certainly appreciate all of the information regarding the innovation and the private programs, but I also believe that the government has a responsibility as well in terms of educating our youth, and I appreciate all of the other resources that are available, but they should not take precedence. I think government has a role there. So thank you very much, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. Ms. Houchin, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for testifying before us today. In alignment with this committee's continued effort for innovation and transparency in the higher education space, I want to discuss some of the ways my district and the state of Indiana are excelling in this area. Dr. Rennick, like Georgia State University, Indiana's Purdue University is also part of the University Innovation Alliance, which works to bring together the best ideas from leading research universities across the country. What is the unique collaboration happening within the University Innovation Alliance, and why is that important?
Yeah, the University Innovation Alliance has existed now for almost a decade, and it was a unique partnership initially between 11 institutions. Both Purdue and Georgia State were founding members. The presidents got together and decided that they needed to do something to move the needle in significant ways on graduating, especially low-income students and students of color. And the idea behind it is similar to some of what I've talked about in my testimony, that there are a lot of new approaches out there that were not in our grasp as recently as 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, we weren't talking about using AI to support students or predictive analytics or CRM technologies and so forth. These institutions are all research institutions, and so they've gotten together and said, we can contribute to the national discussion by doing cutting-edge research in this space. We pioneered in the UIA initial studies of the use of predictive analytics back in 2012 and 13 and so forth, where these new approaches were just beginning to be used. We've also experimented with the uses of AI and chatbot across the UIA as well. So it's an attempt to bring the powers of research institutions to the space that we're discussing this morning.
Thank you. And as a representative of a very rural area with lots of low-income families, I do appreciate the Innovation Alliance. I want to switch gears a little bit towards student loan crisis. As you probably know, student debt in the United States is now over $1.6 trillion, with the average borrower owing over $37,000. Previous Purdue president Mitch Daniels famously in Indiana froze tuition rates. We on our side of the aisle are opposed to this student loan bailout, student loans being free, paid for by the 87% of people who don't take out student loans, yet lose out due to the inflation of the cost of that. But I want to just touch on, since 1980, the average cost of college has risen, college attendance has risen by 180%. Transparency on the cost of college is a theme that I continue to hear in constituent meetings. I'd like to see more of that as we consider the higher education reauthorization in this committee, because we've seen things like transparency in college borrowing reduce cost. Just this past year, Indiana University in my district established an academic tuition and fee task force to clarify the biennial process of setting tuition and fees for undergrad students, resulting in increased transparency and as an opportunity to find savings. Dr. Carroll, you mentioned in your testimony that decreasing student costs is one of the 2 challenges we must address in our conversations. Would you agree that transparency in student loans, like what Indiana University has done with their academic tuition and fee task force, should be included in our attempt to decrease student loan debt?
Thank you for the question. Born and raised a Hoosier, appreciate what has been happening in Indiana related to higher ed innovation. And yes, I do think that that is a good model, and that transparency needs to be accompanied by clarity. So particularly for first-generation students, but for all of us, the explanation of the costs of college, the total cost of the entire college experience, and where those funds go must be much more clearer as we proceed.
As a parent of a college student who's just navigated her first year, that would be appreciated by just me alone as a parent. In an effort for increased transparency, Indiana in 2015 passed a law requiring that every college and university that participates in state aid programs must send annual student loan debt notification to borrowers. Today, 13 states have put this requirement into law. This notification requirement has led to a 48% reduction in undergraduate student loans for Indiana residents since 2013, totaling $156.5 million. Dr. Carroll, do you think it would be beneficial for this committee to consider legislation that would require annual student loan debt notifications be sent to borrowers for more clarity and transparency?
Clarity and transparency would be well served.
Thank you. I look forward to continuing these conversations as part of this committee as we continue to consider the Higher Education Reauthorization Act. And it's apparent to me that Indiana certainly has been a leader when it comes to college cost transparency, and I'm grateful for that as a Hoosier. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Houcher. Ms. Manning, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here today to talk about this really important subject. Ms. Erickson, I'd like to start with you. Research has consistently shown that there is a significant benefit to students when institutions provide meaningful wraparound student support services that remove barriers to academic success. Programs that address issues like food insecurity, childcare, technology, and mental health issues particularly benefit non-traditional students who are increasingly entering higher education. I was pleased to see that many institutions utilize their COVID relief funds to either begin implementing or scale up programs that provide wraparound supports. So can you share some examples of evidence-based practices that contribute to wraparound student support?
Absolutely. You know, CUNY ASAP is probably the most famous of the programs that provides these wraparound supports, and I think the most important part of it is that it recognizes that students are people. They have a lot going on in their lives. They have to get to and from school, they have to get to and from work, they have to care for children or elders or other family members. They have a lot going on, and they have shown that when you pair small financial supports with what they call intrusive advising, which I think maybe needs a better title because that's a not particularly nice sounding one, but it means you follow the student and they have a relationship with an academic advisor throughout their period of time who also helps them get access to other things they may need, food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid, other things that they might need just as a human or as a family. They have seen that they have been able to double their graduation rates through this program, which I think is just incredible because we've talked about the importance of getting that degree, and so many of the folks that are defaulting on their student loans or in real trouble are the folks that signed up, got debt, and then never got a degree, and so they can't really get the wage gain to get it back. So I think those kinds of wraparound supports are so important. I know that the COVID funding helped 18 million students stay enrolled. In particular, mostly at public universities, and 80% of HBCU students were helped by that funding. So in an awful time for our country and an awful time for those students, Congress was able to step up and support. And I know New America has done some fantastic research on the fact that hiring social workers for students that were in need has seriously amped up their ability to serve their students, even students that they didn't know were in need before. And so I think providing those kind of support services and recognizing that students are humans is absolutely essential.
I am proud to have in my district the largest HBCU, North Carolina A&T State University. I also have one of the largest MIS serving universities, University of North Carolina at Greensboro, and I was shocked to see at one of my visits to UNC Greensboro that there is a food bank that is regularly used by students who simply don't have the money to buy their food. I want to move into a different area. High school has emerged as a critical recruitment source for colleges as well as trades, technical schools, accreditation programs, and other post-secondary pathways for a variety of different careers. I have in my district a lot of advanced manufacturing, and we know that people cannot fill those jobs unless they have some secondary training, because those skilled jobs need more than a high school degree. High schools are also critical points of entry to recruit students into fields where we're currently facing workforce shortages, and I see that all across my district, whether we're talking about teachers or childcare providers, skilled trades, nursing, social work, school psychologists. So how can Congress further support programs that expose students to different career paths early on, and where should we start exposing them to these career opportunities?
You know, I think the best example that I've experienced is the DC public school system. DC Public Schools has created a system of support where every single person that is in high school in Washington, DC has to put together a college or career plan. And they do it very early so that they can start tailoring their education in high school to what their career or their postgraduate studies might be. And then creating partnerships with private entities, with employers who need those folks to fill those jobs. And I sat through one of the career plan workshops in DC Public School that it was astounding, the level of kind of interaction and technology and learning that these folks were doing while they were sophomores in high school, learning how to really do a job that would then pay them well. And I think we would really be encouraged to fund those programs, encourage private partners to fund those programs so that we can have access to that for more students.
Thank you so much. My time has expired. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Manning. Mr. Thompson, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for your time here today. While the COVID-19 pandemic exposed many issues in our education system, one surprising aspect was how easily many post-secondary institutions were able to transition to remote learning. Now, this was largely due to the fact that even before the pandemic, online education was rapidly growing, with at least 3.5 million post-secondary students enrolled exclusively in distance learning in the fall of 2019, and at least 7.3 million students taking at least one distance learning course. Online education is here to stay for those who want it. As co-chair of the Congressional e-Learning Caucus, I'm committed to bringing together education stakeholders from all areas of the e-learning ecosystem and identifying improvements we can make to allow quality e-learning to grow and succeed. Dr. Carroll, I was impressed by your college in 3 design, and I'm wondering if you have incorporated online learning at all to help achieve the goals of the program.
Thank you for that question. We are supported by a novel platform that we co-created with Google Cloud, and some of the learning is hybrid, whereas the initial learning is fully in person. We are really very much focused on the quality of the learning, the quality of the teaching, and the quality of the student development experience. While we were in development of the program, the pandemic led Mayo Clinic to make some of their positions fully remote. And as such, some of the internships that are paid and embedded within our program became remote. And so we are in the process of studying the effectiveness of those remote internships as part of what we're doing. But appreciate your focus on quality within e-learning, and I think there's a lot for all of us to learn and then to apply those results as we move forward.
And thank you for that. Have you found that it is easier for students to complete degrees on time if distance learning is a part of their program?
I think it's important to talk about at least 2 different types of students. Students who are coming straight from high school and students who are returning adult learners. And the answers vary based on the type of student. And I think that's an important part of what the work you'll be doing.
Any thoughts on how we can effectively expand online learning opportunities at other institutions of higher education, including career and technical education?
I think a great opportunity at present is returners, students who started college and did not complete, and creating evidence-based design programs that support their completion in ways that meet important workforce demands at present.
That's a great point. There is a I think, a significant percentage of folks, for various reasons, life circumstances, whatever, that accrue some education and, quite frankly, some debt, but when they drop out or discontinue, there's absolutely no return on investment, and it seems like it'd be a great tool to help with. Dr. Rennick, I want to turn to you now to discuss integrating students into the workforce and ensuring that they have the necessary skills to succeed and match the needs of their employees. I believe the lack of focus on preparing students for the workforce and conversations surrounding higher education has been a detriment to students and employers wide. And so what changes would you suggest we make to the work-study programs to ensure students are more valuable to students as educational experiences?
Yeah, it's a great question, thank you. One of the challenges we face at a large institution like at Georgia State with 52,000 students is scaling meaningful experiences for our students. So one of the things we're doing with work study is layering on top of it a program by which the work study experience of the student in the campus assignment is also part of an educational experience. We're working with the supervisors of these work study students so that they can be getting the student to think about what kind of skills they're learning that are going to be marketable and useful once they hit the workforce. And we're also getting these supervisors to think more proactively about what kind of opportunities exist within these work-study experiences for the students to learn these sorts of competencies that they'll use after graduation.
Yeah, and I think that obviously it's soft skills, but it's also the hard skills. If we can make that match, all the better. I want to thank you, and I look forward to working with all of you to continue this conversation and come up with constructive solutions to these issues to improve outcomes for our students. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Scott, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Dr. Riddick, one of the problems we've been trying to address for a long time is completion, and the numbers you've put up are very impressive. It's not easy to achieve, and you rely on a lot of data. What kind of data do you need? What kind of data points do you need, and does that data exist in most colleges?
I think that, thank you for that question. I think the reality is we're working, as I mentioned, with 40 institutions across the National Institute for Student Success. The prevailing problem is not a lack of data, it's a lack of operationalizing the data that the campuses already have. In some cases, they're overwhelmed with data that's being produced by systems and platforms on a day-to-day basis. What the Institute is trying to help these campuses recognize is you can produce really high-level data, but if it's not in the hands of people making decisions in a timely fashion, it's not going to be beneficial to the students or to the institution. And so what we're working on are finding ways to give decision makers the data they need to make informed decisions. It's not just administrators and faculty members, it's the students themselves.
What kind of data points are you talking about?
Well, for instance, one of the things we're doing with students while they're in their first year at Georgia State is making sure they understand what is happening in the marketplace with live data. So if they're majoring in political science, we're sharing with students what political science graduates of Georgia State are doing, what companies they're working for, what organizations, what title, what their salaries are. And we're doing that in the first year so that when they're making decisions about their majors, they have the kind of information they need to be informed, rather than telling a senior all of a sudden that their expectations are very different than the reality.
Are you talking about data like attendance and class attendance?
Well, in the case of the example I was just citing, we're using a company called Stepping Blocks to scrape data from publicly accessible websites like LinkedIn to find our alums and then translate that data back to our current students so they know what our alums are doing.
How would you know if a student is of concern? I mean, if you've got data that they're skipping class or falling behind, how would you know? What kind of data points do you know to flag people for concern?
Yep. Almost all academic courses at post-secondary institutions now involve using learning management platforms. We're tracking as early as the first week of classes which students are signed up for classes but not interacting electronically with those platforms. We can even look at logons into the Georgia State web system. If a student is taking on-campus classes but not logging on to the website, we'll reach out. Maybe nothing's wrong. Maybe they had no reason to be on the learning management system or the website. But the idea is to catch these problems early on. If you find the problems in the first week, you can get the student to support and you can get them caught up.
What does support mean?
What does support mean? It depends upon what we're finding, but if a student's not engaged in their classes in the first week, we will ask them, is it because you don't have the right technology? Is it because you're facing a financial crisis? Are you going through something emotionally? Are you academically overwhelmed?
And
by reaching out to the student, we will then be able to target and customize the support they receive.
Does that require costs like counselors, or do you use peers?
We have greatly expanded our advising staff at Georgia State. In fact, we've moved from about 40 full-time counselors to over 100. But those have been paid for by the increase in tuition and fee revenues that come from graduating 3,500 more students every year, because those were 3,000 students whose revenues, in effect, were walking away from the university. So we've reinvested the gains we've made in tuition and fee revenues back into the students and the kind of supports that the evidence show they most need.
Thank you. Ms. Erickson, as you're aware, a lot of the short-term programs are not eligible for Pell Grants, and we're looking at ways to make those affordable. What guardrails and protections should we be thinking about in that context?
Thank you so much. I think that it is important that we think about pathways into the workforce that are sustainable and good quality, that aren't a four-year degree. And I know that folks on both sides of the aisle are looking at the expansion of Pell Grants to shorter-term programs. I think the question is, are those programs going to set students up to actually earn more than if they hadn't gone there in the first place? And so I think it's really important to look not just at completion, because if it's an 8-week program, it's pretty easy to complete, but whether that student is able to then earn more than the average high school graduate in their state. I know that that's a guardrail that is included in your legislation, and I think it's one that's really important. Also looking at, are they able to pay back any loans that they might have taken out for other programs? Students are moving from program to program, so I think it's really important to look at the earnings thresholds to make sure that we're not actually signing folks up for programs that then leave them worse off than they would have been had they never gone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Ms. Leisure-Fernandez, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And thank you for the expertise and insights you're sharing with us today. And what we do know is that we want to make sure that we grow our middle class, right? That we invest in America, and we do that by investing in our most valuable resource we have, which is our students, which is us, right? Invest in us, invest in our communities, invest in our families. And so, I think that a lot of what we're talking about today is how do you rate those investments, and how do you make sure that they are accomplishing that goal, right? Of helping everybody to help grow that middle class. And so we know that students from low-income backgrounds and those whose parents don't have college experience, that they are less likely than their peers to enroll in college, and sometimes less likely to complete. And in New Mexico, 40% of post-secondary students are first generation, and many of them find themselves navigating this system, which is not easy, right? It's from the FAFSA, this and that. So Ms. Erickson, can you tell us a little bit about what the consequences are of inequities in college access and success for income inequality and social mobility? Because that's what we want to do. We want to bring that social, that economic inequality, grow that middle class. Can you share a bit with us?
Absolutely. I think that, what we really see a stratification across our higher education system, and we've done a lot of work looking at economic mobility that different types of institutions provide. I think why a lot of us really focus on minority serving institutions and HBCUs in particular is that they're great mobility engines. But not all schools are. And I think some of the schools that we hear about the most, that maybe most of the staff that work on the Hill went to, enroll almost no Pell students. And that's really abominable. Those are the schools that have the resources to provide mobility to students that have lower incomes or might have greater needs, and they're not doing the work. And so I don't think we should be rewarding them for perpetuating economic inequality by only enrolling folks that don't need the help that they give. But we do need to really focus on those institutions that are doing the yeoman's work of creating economic mobility, and make sure that we're focused on student success, not just access. I think we often ask on our team, access to what? And just getting through the door doesn't necessarily mean you're going to end up with a quality credential or something that's going to allow you to get into the workforce and pay back those loans. And too often, because of the voucher system we've created within the Pell Grant program, which we spend $30 billion on a year, we're actually incentivizing bad actors and predatory programs to go after students who do have that access to the Pell Grant, and then really not provide them any return on investment. And frankly, I think that's very frustrating because that's my money. It's not giving the taxpayers any return on investment either. So I think the gainful employment rule that the administration has just put out, looking at, if you're a career program, do you leave most of your graduates able to make enough money that they can pay back their taxpayer-funded debt? That's a really good step, and there are others. But we have to be able to look at the outcomes for those students, not just whether they're getting in the door, because oftentimes the worst outcome is they get in the door, they fail out, and then they're left with debt that they can't repay.
Another little piece of that, how do you succeed? Because we just finished over the last couple, just a few days ago, when you think about it, about 10 days ago, thinking about how do we make sure that you are able to learn? And we know that that's why we have the nutrition in schools programs. That's why we have SNAP. We really need to make sure that you are able to learn. And we know that there are too many students, post-secondary students, who are homeless and who are hungry. And we need to address that. That's true in New Mexico, where we have 60% of higher education students are food insecure, and 20% of graduate students, they know what their goal is, but they don't have a place to live. So I see that my time's up, but I will send these questions so that you could send us written answers to the panel about this, of how do we address these basic living needs so that those students can actually realize the success that higher education should provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leisure-Fernandez. I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes. Dr. Rennick, I've followed your work at Georgia State University for years. I'm pleased the university is now able to share your expertise with other institutions across the country through the National Institute for Student Success. And just make sure we get into the record, the book, Won't Lose This Dream by Andrew Gumbel, about what Georgia State did. In this committee, we've been trying to change the dialogue that not every American needs to immediately enroll in a university to receive a bachelor's degree. But I do believe in lifelong learning, and if an individual's been educated, I believe it's important for them to receive some sort of credential. You mentioned in your testimony that Georgia State consolidated with a large community college. As a former community college president myself, I'm very interested in how community colleges are tackling today's challenges. What are student success strategies that community colleges or even shorter-term education providers can utilize to ensure their students successfully earn a credential?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I appreciate that. There are a lot of differences between students, and a place like Georgia State has the whole spectrum from age and race and demographics and so forth. But what we're seeing with our consolidation with Perimeter College, the community college partner, is that there are more similarities between students than differences. And what students need in order to succeed are clear pathways. They need guidance. If they go off path, they need somebody to be watching and making sure that we get them back on path again. They need these micro grants, the kind of data-based approaches to providing financial aid. what perhaps has been not fully appreciated is while Georgia State has improved its graduation rates by 70%, that was over a decade of time. What we've done at Perimeter College in 5 years was basically triple the graduation rate. So these students that are often under-resourced are even more needful of the kind of proactive supports and the use of data and the use of technology to serve them. Far higher percentage of our community college students are working, have parents or siblings they're responsible for, and they need these kind of supports that are delivered to them 24/7, are delivered to them where they don't have to go into some office at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to get that targeted support. That's what we're seeing at the community colleges.
As you were talking earlier about data, I thought about there's a lot of data out there, sometimes not enough information. And the other thing was high-tech, high-touch. We've known for a long time you need to do high-tech, high-touch. Mr. Schultz, the Student Freedom Initiative is a very exciting thing that I did not know about until this hearing came up. It shows that strong leadership nonprofits can harness private sector funding to support dozens of HBCUs and MSIs. Have there been any barriers to your work?
Ma'am, thank you for the question. The barriers that we've seen are not the typical barriers that you would expect to come out of the program. Part of what we want to do is, just as you indicated, people don't know what we're doing, right? Yes, we actually provide all of the wraparound services that are being spoken about here today. Yes, we provide the micro-grant support. Yes, we provide internships and certification programs such that students leave with 2 paid internships, not just more advantageous form of private education loan, but they have 2 paid internships, they have micro grants, but in addition to actually working with the students, we actually expand the capacity of the institutions through helping them expand their endowments, helping make sure that they have broadband, making sure that the students actually have the underlying capacity at the institution to help them be successful.
Great. One of the challenges we have as policymakers is convincing stakeholders to abandon status quo policies that don't help students and exacerbate the college cost problem. One of those policies is Parent Plus loans. What do you say to those who want to hold on to old policies like Parent Plus loans and do not want to embrace new private financial products such as SFI's alternative to Parent Plus loans?
I'm watching the clock, so in the interest of time, again, another good question. What we did is we actually went and listened to the students, to the faculty, staff, and executive leadership. And as part of the standing up of the program, we spoke to probably 15 or 20 of the institutional leads and found out from them what options made best sense for their students. Do they need wraparound services? Yes. Do they need a means by which to have meaningful work experience while they're in college? Yes. Internships. Do they need to find ways to enhance or upskill before they graduate? Yes. So we actually listened to the students, faculty, and staff and designed a program specifically to meet their needs.
Thank you. Dr. Carroll, my time is just about up, but I do want to compliment you as a transformative leader and to thank you for what you have done. You've certainly abandoned the status quo in your university, and we're very, very proud of you, and thank you so much for being here, and I thank also you, Ms. Erickson, for coming. With that, I would like to recognize Mr. Allen for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairwoman for waving me on for these questions, and I thank our witnesses today and for what you're doing for young people in this country. Dr. Carroll, particularly, I'm thrilled for this committee to highlight the innovative work institutions are undertaking to develop 3-year degrees. Let me highlight one more. I'm proud to say that in my district, the Medical College of Georgia at Augusta University has led the way in medical school innovation through the creation of an accelerated medical school curriculum known as MCG 3+ program. As we all know, the entire country is facing a physician shortage, and while physicians are in short supply everywhere, the lack of providers in rural areas is especially severe, which is a majority of my district. In order to quickly address the physician pipeline, MCG 3+ creates individualized medical education tracks for undergraduate students to prepare them more quickly with the competencies they need for the MD program. MCG 3+ offers a 3-year degree primary care pathway for students who commit to primary care practice in rural or underserved Georgia. These students graduate in 3 years and immediately enter a residency and receive a scholarship for their services in rural areas. Students can also choose the dual degree pathway, which allows them to complete their undergraduate degree in 3 years and spend the 4th year earning a master's degree aligned with academic medicine, such as a master's degree in public health. And lastly, students can now choose a pathway that allows their 4th year to be spent on site at one of 350 clinical education locations at hospitals and practices across Georgia, affording students the opportunity for advanced clinical and research preparation in their specialty of choice. Dr. Carroll, as you detailed in your testimony, developing 3-year degrees takes a lot of partnerships. Dr. Brooks Kill, president of Augusta University, and other leaders at the Medical College of Georgia championed this 3-year degree model across our state. Can you speak about the importance of continued leadership for advancing relevant education opportunities and offering advice or commendation to those at Augusta University?
I'd like to have a conversation with them, to be sure. That sounds like a wonderful and innovative program. What has been imperative for us is to ensure that the conversations we have are broad and that there is great representation from the employer partners and from those who will be served by the graduates, as well as the students themselves, and with faculty there listening as the designers. We've needed to put into place a structured partnership with regular meetings that support adaptation as we go, because as we try these new kinds of programs, we will absolutely learn as we go and we'll need to adapt. So staying agile through continued conversation that is structured and built into the partnership will be really imperative. But I look forward to hearing about the success of that program.
Thank you. Mr. Schultz, as online education becomes a preference for many students and adult learners, we're all reminded that many students lack access to rural broadband. In fact, eliminating rural broadband deserts in Georgia has been a top priority of mine time here in Congress. Can you talk more about how the partner institutions you work with are becoming a catalyst to bring broadband to their communities while also equipping the institution itself to offer online education?
Yeah, thank you for the question. One of the areas that we're working with in our MSI capacity building area is exactly as you indicated. 82%, as identified by McKinsey, of our HBCUs are sitting in broadband deserts. Broadband deserts are defined not just to be connectivity and pipes, but also digital literacy, workforce development, and like. So we understand and appreciate the concern that you have. And so as part of that activity, whether it be in South Carolina with Claflin or as part of the BEAD and DE activities, we're working with some 10 institutions as we speak, leading up to as many as 70, whereby we're actually supporting the activities that they have to ensure that they actually can take advantage of the broadband equity access and deployment activities, as well as the DE, the digital equity funds, to ensure that they can actually reduce the digital divide that they have in these communities. And yes, some of the rural areas in Georgia are on that list.
Exactly, and we're working hard to get that done. Dr. Rennick, I thank you for also being here today and representing our great state of Georgia in higher education. I'm glad all of my colleagues get to hear about the great student success work done at Georgia State University. My son-in-law played soccer and graduated from Georgia State University, and I think he's on the athletic board there. But thank you, Madam Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Allen. We're pleased to have you wave on to the committee today. I want to say thank you again to our witnesses and to all our members who came. We're extremely interested in the idea of innovations. The goal, I think, on both sides of the aisle here is to help students succeed, gain credentials, gain degrees, get good jobs, and be contributing members to our society. And we're looking for all the ways that that can be accomplished. Thank you very much. There being no further business, the committee stands adjourned.